Ortiz. Now, you had a really busy 2021 for a guy who's not playing anymore in the middle of this pandemic. You get named senior advisor to the commissioner in January. You get named to the Hall of Fame board of directors in July. And then, of course, in October, you become a part owner of the Mariners. So first, Ken, I want to ask you, with all that's going on in your life with your family, I know you're so busy with your kids, why this move to the executive level on so many fronts?
Just trying not to be a kid. So many years of people calling you the kid and things like that. It's time that, I start making decisions and help grow the game of baseball. Other than me playing, I think, the more important thing is getting out there and doing work for baseball and showing kids that, hey, it's a great sport. Let's go have some fun with it.
Ken, we've been talking about this all day. No matter what happens tonight, there are already 6 individuals who have been elected to the Hall of Fame, including the great Buck O'Neil, who had this amazing baseball life, and it's so great to see him in the Hall. Jim Cott, Tony Oliva, we mentioned, Manny Minoso. All that said, how important is it for the Hall to have a player elected by the BBWAA tonight?
It's important. I mean, the fans come out there and show that their support each and every year coming to Cooperstown. I think it's greatly important for them to have at least one, because these are the guys that they've seen play throughout the years. Going to the Negro League Museum with Buck was like one of the highlights of my young career. He actually picked me up on a day game and drove me over there. A night game, picked me up, getaway day, drove me there, took 2.5 hours to go through the museum. And I will never forget that as long as I live. I had on a green suit because it was getaway day. And, he spent the time with every player that he came, around. And, I don't know Jim that well, but, just listen to some of the stories that he was just telling and things like that. These are baseball guys. And it's very important that, they get recognized for what they did and what they're doing.
Now, Ken, sitting on the board of directors as you do with the Hall of Fame, what does that entail? What does a guy like you do as part of that board?
Well, the first meeting I went to, I just listened because it was a lot of information. And, then I talked to Ms. Clark and we went through some things. And so the second one is going to be a little bit easier. It's actually here later on this month. So, next month, excuse me. So I'll be able to input some ideas, but for the most part, it's just listening and getting caught up to speed of what they've been talking about for, the last 2-3 years.
And Ken, I mentioned when you were elected in 2016, you received 99.3% of the vote. That was the highest percentage ever at that time. It has been exceeded only by Mariano, who was unanimous in 19. And it seemed, okay, Ken Griffey Jr., first ballot, everybody kind of knew you were going to be elected, but you're the guy who is in the middle of this. What was that day like for you waiting for the call?
Hectic. Because you have an idea that you're going to get the call, but until that phone rings, you don't know. For me, just the idea of like trying to do normal things around the house. And, my friends playing jokes on me like 5 minutes before the actual phone call, they actually called me. And I just looked at the phone. Then I looked at the person who called me like, okay, you got me. But for the most part, it's just, try to stay calm. And it's hard. Once the phone call was done, we did the interview with Pedro. What's really crazy is I still have his notes. So that was the one thing that, I cherish, after the actual call, to have Pedro's notes. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there and we go, all right, we're going to eat. And then we get done eating, come back, and then, we got to get up I get home at like 12. I got to clean up a little bit, and it's like 2:00 in the morning now. And your plane's at 6. So you like 2 hours of sleep and then get on a plane and head to New York. So it's a hectic couple days, but I could deal with it.
Good. Now, Ken, since being elected, you've had a few times now where you've been able to go back to Cooperstown, of course, not last year with the pandemic, but recently. And that experience, we talked about this with Jim Palmer and some of the others as well. It's unlike anything else as a player. It's one thing when you're in your clubhouse with your teammates and you have great players in there, you have not so great players. When you're up in Cooperstown at the hotel sitting around with those guys, they're all great players. They're all legends. And how much enjoyment, I would ask, have you gotten out of that experience, just being surrounded by those guys?
It's been, you just look at some of the guys and the numbers that they put up. My favorite is Hank. Walking in and everybody goes, "That's the man." They just look at it like it's still, we're that little kid and you see this idol that walks in, and he'd always make sure that I gave him a hug and he talked to me, and so this year was going to be a little different, with him not being there, but I may have to just give him an air hug and say thank you, because he's done a lot for my family and baseball. So it's going to be weird not seeing him there, but we still remember him. He's still the top of the food chain.
Absolutely. Now, Ken, you hit 630 homers, but you weren't just remembered for that. 10-time Gold Glove winner, one of the most exciting center fielders any of us has ever seen. And yet one of your teammates, Edgar Martinez from the Mariners, was elected primarily as a DH. And tonight, David Ortiz stands what seems to be a pretty good chance of getting elected as even more of a DH than Edgar was. Now, I wonder how you view the designated hitter role in terms of the Hall of Fame. Should the best DHs be in there, or should there be some kind of bar that is higher for them?
No, they got to hit. They got a job to do. Nobody, it's like everybody in the NBA, they can all shoot, but you get a certain role when you get to that high level. Through high school, you're the best shooter. Through college, you're probably one of the best shooters. You get to pros, you may not be one of the best shooters, but you're still out there. And the same thing, you may not be the best defensive player. You may not have the strongest arm, but you can flat hit. And in the American League, they have a spot. I remember, early, growing up, the DH was for an older guy that could still hit, didn't play every day. Now you don't have that. You got guys that can flat out hit who are in their 20s, but you got a better defensive player, and it gives a slight advantage to the offense. So do I mind? Absolutely not. I mean, these guys have to go out there and do a job, and you don't see the DH in the 8th and 9th slot. You see them in 3, 4, and 5. So they are doing damage.
Now, the issue of PEDs. You told Shannon Sharp on a podcast in 2020 that you never used performance-enhancing drugs because you didn't want anyone to doubt your authenticity as a player. Mm-hmm. Now, the issue of PEDs is one that we debate constantly with regard to the Hall of Fame. First question, how much attention do you pay to that debate?
None. I don't. It's just one of those things that you just, it didn't involve me, so why am I going to pay attention to it? As long as it doesn't involve me, I can't really, nobody knows who did what or anything. They're just, everybody's speculating on this thing. So I don't believe in speculation. If somebody's seen it and, can verify it, then I can go with it. But until then, I just sit there and go, it didn't involve me, so keep it moving.
Okay, with some guys, it wasn't speculation. Alex, for instance, Rodriguez, we know he admitted to using early in the 2000s. Then, of course, he was suspended for a year. So as a member of the Hall's board of directors, do you have an opinion on whether players like him or players like Barry Bonds, who were never found to have tested positive?
Yeah, but we don't get the vote until later.
Correct.
We have the voting after 10 years. So it doesn't matter what we say. It's all what you guys say for the first 10 years. And then, it will go from there until they get to that point. We have to, deal with what the writers say. And then, when they come to the Veterans Committee, then we will have to discuss it. But for the right now, that discussion hadn't even came up, in the meeting that we had. It was more, hey, how can we get the people into Cooperstown and if there's a strike?
All right, fair question. Hopefully there will not be. So
No.
As we go forward here, what do you remember most about David Ortiz and competing against him?
What do I remember the most? Well, that he was a Mariner first.
That's right.
That my dad didn't want the Mariners to trade him.
Okay.
He said he's going to be a hell of a hitter, and you just can't, you don't grow those guys on trees. And I remember, me being 25, 26 when my dad said it. And then he goes to Minnesota, and all of a sudden he goes to Boston and exploded. He's the guy that loves baseball, will do anything for you. I called him a couple months ago and asked him a question. We're thinking about taking the family to Dominican, and he says, "Hey, stay at my house." I mean, that's just the way he is. He's very open and honest, and he's one of those guys that baseball needs him and we need him. I mean, we love him.
Gotcha. Now, Ken, the Mariners, great year last year. Now you're a part owner. Do you look at the game differently in that role than you did as a player? I mean, obviously you do. I guess my better question would be, how differently do you look at it? What will you be looking at now in your role as someone with a stake in the team?
Well, I've only had 2 meetings. In the first 2, I've been just sitting there listening. My thing is try to continue to build. I think that, 20 years of not being in the playoffs is a long time. And it's just, the people of Seattle and the state of Washington, need something to cheer about during the summer. Not during the winter, but, when people can come out and to an open air stadium and watch a competitive team, that's what you need. And if we can continue to build, I think we're going to be all right.
All right.
Do I look at things differently? Sometimes.
Okay. In what way? Now, do you see a player do something and say, "Oh, what is he doing?" Because as a player, you might do that.
No, I never do that.
Okay.
Just mainly just, I look at approaches, how people approach in at bat, but I've always been that way. Trying to set up pitchers and things like that. So I look at more hitters trying to set up pitchers than I look at, outfield and infield, because sometimes, you'll glance at something and the second baseman or shortstop will take off running. And you're like, oh, where do I throw the ball to now? So those things are going to happen. Just, approach fundamentally sound at the plate, doing the small things, getting the guys over, getting them in, making it easy for the guy behind you. Those things are important. And those are the things that are lost now is, everybody wants to hit the 3-run homer. Everybody says baseball is boring. Well, baseball is boring because there's no action, because guys are not putting the ball in play. You put the ball in play, you don't have time to sit there and eat popcorn and stuff like that, because you're too busy looking at guys run around the bases. A guy hits the ball out the ballpark. What do? Oh, you go back to eating. The guy is on first and second and somebody steals. You're sitting there anticipating a play. The most exciting play in baseball is the triple, because somebody's running, and is he going to make it? Is he not? Or the play at the plate from the guy scoring from first. Those are the only 2, that people pay attention to. And we need to bring that back, being more aggressive on the base paths and things like that.
Well, for all your home runs, all the catches you made, everything you did, one of the most memorable images of your career, 95 playoffs, scoring in that playoff game, sliding into home, celebrating. That's what you're talking about, right? That's the action you want.
Yeah, that's what brings people to the ballpark. If you look at teams that had speed in the, the 80s and early 90s, those are the teams that everybody watched. Nobody went and watched a team that went out and hit home runs, unless you were Oakland, but they still had guys that could steal. You know, the top of the order with Ricky and Dave, you know, Walt Weiss and a bunch of the guys that, you know, made sure that, hey, when the big guys came up, we had to make sure that we were in scoring position for them.